It seemed like an eternity since someone's cold hand had pulled me into more darkness. No, I wasn't afraid. I was more worried about where Xavier was and why he wasn't answering me. It was very cold. I opened my eyes and realized that I was standing in a tunnel. But how did I get here? So, Xavier touched the book with the symbol, and then a cold wind blew. The lanterns went out, and I found myself in a tunnel. When I looked around, I realized that the living room was behind me, so... "Whitney, come here!" A voice came from up ahead, and I hurried toward Xavier. It was cold and windy in the tunnel, and I realized that I was going down the stone steps. Wow, I liked this adventure with Xavier more and more. Suddenly, I found myself in a small, almost circular room. Xavier took my hand, and I realized that the cold, almost icy hand that had dragged me into the tunnel was his hand. It was very dark, but surprisingly, our flashlights came on, and we saw... You'll find out what happened next in a minute. But for now, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And make sure you have the bell clicked. Then you'll know when there's a new video coming out on the channel. In this dark room, we saw a large chest in the corner. But we couldn't open it. We needed a key. We looked around the room, a few empty shelves with cobwebs, and that was it. So strange. Xavier, let's go back to the living room and see if we can find the key. Let's do it. The boy agreed with me. And besides, we already know how to get in here by clicking on that leather-bound book again. It opens the secret entrance to the tunnel. And we were back to our starting point. The bookcase turned out to be a sliding door, which we pushed back, hiding the tunnel. A search of the living room yielded nothing. The stairs to the second floor were so dilapidated that it was dangerous to go up. And the second floor was also very burned from the fire. Something might fall on our heads at any moment. We looked around in confusion. Suddenly, my gaze stopped on a bookcase. Xavier, what was that book you were reaching for before we were in the tunnel? The boy walked over to the bookcase and pointed at the book. Do you see the symbol on it? That's how the sun was depicted by the ancient Mayan tribe. You know them? I nodded in response. Of course, I've read a lot about that civilization. Xavier smiled. A pendant with the same sun symbol had once been given to me by my grandmother, so I recognized it and reached for the book. My heart beat faster. The solution was somewhere near. And I began to think aloud. It means that only you, Xavier, could unravel the entrance to the tunnel. Grandmother gave you the pendant for a reason. Where is it, by the way? Xavier took his hand out of his pocket, and I saw the pendant in his hand. I always carry it with me as a memory of my grandmother. I twirled the pendant in my hands, and then I lightly pressed the center. And oops, it opened. Xavier opened his mouth in surprise. Wow, look! It's a key! Can it fit in the chest? Whitney, you really know how to solve riddles! And he pressed me tenderly against him. It was unexpected and very pleasant, I tell you. We hurried back into the tunnel. When I got to the chest, I put the key in the lock and turned it. There was a slight clang. And Xavier and I held our breath. And presto! The chest was open. At the bottom was a thick notebook. I opened it and realized it was a diary. Xavier's grandmother's diary. And as much as I wanted to know what secrets were hidden in its pages, it was none of my business. I held out the notebook to Xavier. This is your grandmother's diary. Here. Tears welled up in Xavier's eyes. He pressed the diary to his chest and whispered, Thank you, Whitney. I always wanted to know more about my grandmother, about how she lived, and maybe why she died. I couldn't help myself. The diary was definitely meant for you, Savior. Because all this time, the key was in the pendant your grandmother gave you. I'll be sure to look into it. Thank you for helping me. And Savior hugged me again. I definitely liked it. But we had to go now. We had already spent a lot of time here. It was well past midnight. We slipped out of the house and walked briskly down the street. There wasn't a soul around. It was good that Savior and I lived only a few blocks from each other, and we could walk home. Savior walked me to the doorstep and kissed me on the cheek. I nodded quickly in response and hid behind the door. I couldn't sleep all night. I replayed my adventure with Savior over and over in my head. He was cool and interesting. He never joked stupidly or vulgarly, unlike my classmates that pissed me off. And I like him. With that thought in mind, I ran into class this morning. I wanted to discuss everything with Savior. Maybe he read the diary overnight, and there are new details to investigate. I was already planning our next adventure. But Savior didn't come to school that day. Neither did the next day. He showed up at the end of the week with dark circles under his eyes. And he didn't even look at me. He took a seat in the back of the classroom, and when we accidentally bumped into each other in the corridor at recess, he hissed, "Don't you dare come near me again! Never again! Or the secret my grandmother was so carefully hiding would be revealed, and then you and your family would be in trouble, okay?" What's he talking about? Any thoughts? What's the best thing to do in this situation? Your answer will determine how I proceed. So write your opinion in the comments and like this video.